Welcome to Mimir Library, where timeless stories find their voice.
This is Chapter 7 of Waves Between Us by Amir Honarmand. Enjoy.
Alara woke before her alarm, the first blush of dawn barely visible through her bedroom curtains. Sleep had been elusive, her mind replaying the kiss until the memory blurred with dreams. She stretched, feeling a lightness in her body that hadn't been there in years. She arrived at Tatlu mornings just as the horizon turned rose gold, the sea a sheet of hammered copper beneath the awakening sky. The cafe was still locked in pre-dawn silence, but as she approached, a familiar figure materialized on the deck. Liam sat barefoot on the wooden planks, camera slung over his shoulder, a steaming mug of Turkish coffee cradled between his palms. He must have brewed it himself using the small pot she kept in the kitchen. His hair was tousled from sleep or the gentle morning breeze, and when he looked up and saw her, his smile spread slowly, warming his eyes before reaching his lips. Alara's heart performed a complicated dance in her chest. What did you say to someone the morning after they'd redrawn your entire emotional landscape? "Good morning," he said simply, saving her from having to decide. "Good morning," she echoed, unlocking the door with only a slight tremor of her keys. She moved through her opening routine with practiced ease, though everything felt different. The cafe was the same, the familiar scent of yesterday's spices lingering in the air, the chairs stacked neatly against tables, the floor swept clean. But Alara herself had changed. Each mundane task seemed infused with new significance. Liam followed her inside, setting his mug on the counter. "Need help?" "You can slice the tomatoes for the filling," she said, gesturing toward the refrigerator. "If you want." He rolled up his sleeves, revealing tanned forearms and the edge of that silver ring catching morning light. "Chef's orders." They worked side by side in the kitchen, falling into an unexpected rhythm. Alara mixed flour and water for dough, her hands working from muscle memory, while her awareness remained fixed on Liam's presence beside her. Their shoulders brushed as he reached past her for a knife, the contact sending a pleasant shiver across her skin. "I've been thinking about your gazlame with the wild greens and goat cheese. I tried to describe it to my editor last night, but words failed me." "Did you take a photo of it at least?" she asked, enjoying the easy conversation. Some things deserve to be experienced, not just seen. His eyes met hers, and the double meaning hung between them. Alara's heart felt heat rise to her cheeks. She focused on kneading the dough with more vigor than necessary. "Should I call you chef, or do I need a different title now?" Liam asked, his voice light, but the question underneath anything but casual. Alara looked up, catching the vulnerability beneath his teasing tone. She grinned, flour dusting her fingers as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Stick with Alara, it's safer." His answering smile crinkled the corners of his eyes in that way that made her stomach flutter. The morning light strengthened, spilling through the windows and across the wooden floor in golden puddles. Outside, the Mediterranean stretched endlessly blue, fishing boats dotting the horizon like distant thoughts. "Here," she said, tearing off a piece of dough. "Try rolling one." Their fingers touched as she passed him the rolling pin. He concentrated with enduring seriousness, tongue caught between his teeth as he pressed the dough flat. "Like this?" "Thinner," she instructed, moving behind him. Without overthinking, she placed her hands over his, guiding the motion. Gentle pressure, back and forth. The intimacy of the gesture wasn't lost on either of them. His back was warm against her chest, and she could smell the faint scent of his soap mixed with coffee. When the dough was properly thin, she stepped back, suddenly self-conscious. Now for the filling. Liam sprinkled cheese and vegetables onto the flattened dough with careful attention. His photographer's precision translated well to the kitchen, each ingredient placed with deliberate care. "Now the hard part," she said, demonstrating how to fold the edges. "Then it goes on the sock." The hot, slightly curved metal surface sizzled as she placed her perfectly formed gazleme upon it. Butter melted and bubbled around the edges, the scent of cooking dough filling the kitchen. Liam attempted to flip his creation, but the dough tore, spilling onto the hot surface with a dramatic hiss. Damn! Alara couldn't help laughing at his dismayed expression. It took me years to master that flip. Years? He groaned, attempting to salvage the torn dough. I was hoping to impress you with my kitchen skills by tomorrow. Tomorrow, she repeated, the word catching in her throat. The concept of future days together still felt fragile, like a bubble that might burst if examined too closely. The kitchen filled with warm aromas, melting butter, baking dough, the earthy scent of cheese and herbs. Outside, the city was awakening, the distant hum of traffic growing steadier. Inside, they existed in their own world, moving around each other in a dance that felt surprisingly natural. The door chimed, and Celine burst in, her blonde ponytail bouncing with each energetic step. She stopped short, taking in the sight of them working side by side in the kitchen, Liam's failed gazleme still smoking slightly on the sack. Her eyes widened, darting between them with undisguised interest. A knowing smile spread across her face. "Good morning," she sang, drawing out the words meaningfully. She set her bag down and tied on her apron with exaggerated movements, never taking her eyes off them. "Morning, Celine," Alara replied, aiming for normal and missing by a mile. "Morning," Liam echoed, his lips twitching with suppressed amusement. Celine's gaze fixed on the flower handprint clearly visible on Liam's sleeve. "So, I'm guessing we have a new kitchen helper today?" "Liam was just learning to make gazleme," Alara explained, busying herself with wiping down the counter. "I see. And how's that going?" "Disastrously," Liam admitted, holding up his torn creation. The three of them laughed, the sound breaking any remaining tension. As Celine moved to prepare the front of the cafe for opening, she caught Alara's eye and mouthed a silent, "Oh my God," her expression a mixture of delight and demand for details later. Alara turned back to the stove, a smile playing on her lips that had nothing to do with cooking. The warmth in her chest felt dangerous and wonderful, like standing too close to a fire on a cold night. Part of her wanted to step back, to protect herself from the inevitable burn. But the larger part, the part that had felt his lips on hers under the fairy lights, wanted to move closer, to feel that heat consume her. The ceramic mugs clinked softly as she arranged them on the shelf. Outside, the sea continued its eternal rhythm against the shore. The city awakened fully around them, and in the small, flower-dusted kitchen of Tatlu mornings, something new and fragile and beautiful took its first tentative breaths. By mid-morning, Tatlu mornings buzzed with its familiar rhythm. The wooden deck overflowed with locals lingering over coffee and tourists exclaiming over their first taste of proper gozleme. Alara moved between tables, refilling glasses of ayran and exchanging pleasantries in 3 different languages. She paused by the railing, wiping her hands on her apron, and found her gaze drawn to Liam. He'd slipped effortlessly into the cafe's flow, carrying a crate of fresh vegetables from old Mehmet's truck, laughing at something the fisherman said. His camera hung unused around his neck, forgotten in favor of participation rather than observation. Mehmet patted him on the shoulder before departing, treating Liam like a familiar face rather than the stranger he'd been just days ago. Something warm unfurled in Alara's chest at the sight. A young boy at a nearby table giggled, his face covered in powdered sugar from the dessert gozleme. Liam caught the sound and crouched beside the child, saying something that made both the boy and his mother laugh. Without hesitation, he grabbed a napkin and helped wipe the sugar away, his movements natural and unforced. Seagulls cried overhead, their shadows dancing across the sunlit deck. The Mediterranean sparkled beyond, waves slapping rhythmically against the dock below.
Alara inhaled the salt-laden air, feeling strangely anchored and adrift simultaneously. Liam straightened, noticing her watching. The smile he sent her way felt like a private message across the crowded space. As she turned to head back inside, she noticed a group of backpackers settling at a corner table. 3 young women and 2 men with sun-bronzed skin and well-worn hiking boots. Their oversized packs leaned against the railing, covered in patches from different countries. "You should try the spinach and feta," Liam was saying as he approached their table. "Best I've had anywhere." "You been traveling long?" one of the men asked, unfolding a creased map of Turkey. "On and off for years," Liam replied, leaning against the railing. "You?" 6 months through Eastern Europe, heading to Bodrum next, then Cappadocia. "We might push on to Georgia after," one of the women added. "The Caucasus Mountains are supposed to be incredible for hiking." Alara's hand stilled on the vase of fresh wildflowers she'd been arranging. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but their voices carried clearly across the deck. "What about you?" the backpacker asked. "Where to next?" "I haven't decided yet," Liam shrugged. "I might follow the light." "You always travel alone?" another backpacker inquired. "I guess I'm used to not having to ask anyone." The words struck Alara like a sudden splash of cold water. She turned away quickly, busying herself with the flowers, pushing stems into the vase with unnecessary force. A thorn pricked her finger, and she winced as a drop of blood welled up. She sucked it away, tasting the metallic tang mingled with the sourness of lemon from the wedges she'd been cutting earlier. The chatter continued behind her, talk of hostels and hiking trails and border crossings, the easy camaraderie of those who shared the same unrooted lifestyle. Liam's voice blended with theirs naturally, the language of perpetual movement, his native tongue. Alara set the vase down harder than she intended, water sloshing over the rim. One blossom, already beginning to wilt in the heat, dropped a petal onto the wooden planks.
The late afternoon sun tilted through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor of Tutlu mornings. Alara wiped her hands on her apron, breathing in the comforting scent of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling beams. The cafe had emptied during the post-lunch calmness, leaving only the whisper of the sea and the occasional clink of dishes being washed. Selin appeared in the doorway, her blonde ponytail swinging as she carried a stack of clean plates. "So," she began, her voice deliberately casual, "are you going to tell me what's happening between you and Mr. Ireland, or do I have to drag it out of you?" Alara busied herself with reorganizing spice jars that didn't need reorganizing. "There's nothing to tell." "Right," Selin set down the plates with a knowing smirk. "That's why you've been floating around all morning with that look on your face." "What look?" "Like you're tasting something sweet, but aren't sure if it's good for you." Alara's hand stilled on a jar of sumac. Selin had always been perceptively blunt, but this observation hit uncomfortably close to home. "Are you two a thing now?" Selin pressed, leaning against the counter. "Because the way he watches you when you're not looking—" "We're not a thing," Alara interrupted, the word feeling inadequate for whatever was growing between her and Liam. "It's complicated. He looks at you like you're a secret he doesn't want anyone else to discover," Selin said softly, her usual playfulness giving way to something more genuine. The description caught Alara off guard. She turned away, pretending to check the inventory list pinned to the wall, but her mind replayed the image of Liam's eyes following her across the cafe. "You smile more when he's around, but I think you're also scared. Like every time you laugh, you're waiting to regret it." A lump formed in Alara's throat. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Selin's question hung in the air between them. From outside came the sound of Liam's laughter, deep and genuine, as he chatted with a tourist at one of the few occupied tables. The sound sent a conflicting wave of warmth and unease through Alara's chest. "I have to check the storeroom inventory," she said abruptly, needing to escape Selen's too perceptive gaze. The storeroom at the back of the cafe was cool and dim, smelling of pine shelves and the earthy aroma of stored herbs. Alara closed the door behind her, leaning against it as she exhaled slowly. The single bulb overhead flickered erratically, casting uneven light across the neatly organized shelves. Alone in the quiet space, Matei's words from days earlier resurfaced unbidden. He has the same look in his eyes as that artist from Berlin, the look that's already seeing his next destination. Alara's gaze drifted to the wall where she'd hung one of Liam's photographs, a candid shot of her laughing by the counter, sunlight streaming through her hair. Caught in a moment of pure, unguarded joy. It was beautiful, intimate. How many others had he photographed with that same tenderness? How many cafes in how many countries had he captured with the same appreciative eye before moving on to the next beautiful vista? The back door creaked slightly in the sea breeze. Through it, she could hear Liam's voice, animated as he described some distant place to whoever was listening. The sound simultaneously drew her toward him and reminded her of the inevitable distance that would separate them. The overhead light flickered again, briefly plunging the storeroom into darkness before reluctantly sputtering back to life, a fitting metaphor for the shadow that kept falling over her growing feelings.
Alara's apartment balcony faced the sea, a small oasis 3 stories above the bustle of Antalya's coastal road. She sat cross-legged on the worn cushion of her favorite chair, a simple dinner of stuffed peppers cooling on the plate beside her. The evening air carried the scent of salt and distant grilling fish from the restaurants below. The moon hung full and luminous over the Mediterranean, casting a silver pathway across the dark water. Boats rocked gently in the harbor, their masts creating a rhythmic shadow play against the shimmering surface. Alara touched her grandmother's necklace, the cool silver chain pressing against her collarbone. Her thoughts drifted between the warmth of morning, Liam's hands under hers as she taught him to roll dough, and the cold splash of reality that followed when she overheard him speaking so easily of moving on. From downstairs came the sound of a door opening. Liam's voice floated up, speaking English in the quick, comfortable cadence of a familiar conversation. "Yeah, the light here is incredible. You should see what I've captured already." A pause. "No, not just the landscapes. There's this cafe, and the woman who runs it." Alara's fingers tightened around her necklace. She could go downstairs, say hello, invite him up to share the night view that made her apartment worth every lira of its steep rent. Instead, she remained still, listening as his voice grew fainter, then disappeared altogether as he moved further into the darkness. Wind moaned softly through her drying laundry, white sheets billowing like ghosts in the moonlight. The sounds of the city, distant music, car horns, laughter, created a familiar backdrop that usually comforted her. Tonight, they only emphasized how firmly rooted she was here, while Liam... Her phone buzzed on the small table beside her. Alara glanced down, her heart beating faster when she saw Liam's name. The message contained a photo. The same moon she was watching, its reflection trembling on the water but captured from a slightly different angle. Beneath it, his words. "Thinking of earlier, that moment in the courtyard, I haven't felt like that in a long time." Her thumb hovered over the screen. The moonlit water before her mirrored her emotional state. Beautiful, luminous, but constantly moving, impossible to hold. She set the phone face down beside her, not to reject him, but to hold herself still, to breathe, to remember that the sweet taste of filling her senses might leave her with nothing but hunger when he was gone. The silver pathway on the water shifted as clouds drifted across the moon. Alara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of the space beside her. Empty now. Perhaps always meant to be.
The story ends here, but the library is always open. Subscribe for more free audiobooks.